So I saw my first Chloe Grace Moretz film over the weekend, Greta. In the film, Chloe Grace Moretz stars as the lead character, a naive girl from Boston who has no accent, who lives in Manhattan or New York with her incredibly spoiled best friend slash, I don't know, they don't seem to establish any kind of relationship in the film, but there is a degree of lesbian implication I felt at various points, not between those two characters, but some other ones. But I'll get into that. The other actress who is in a leading role is Isabelle Huppert. She plays this old lady who likes the piano and French society for whatever reason. I feel like the director had some kind of projection there about his own feelings about the French, or at least people who aspire to French snobbery without actually being French. But I'll explain that in the review. And then our last role is also another female character played by Maika Monroe. If you remember the movie It Follows, she plays the girl that gets followed in the film. Anyway, okay, so we'll move on to the review. A brief overview of the film. It employs some pretty good cinematography. Like, it has a lot of patterning in the film, which for my cinematography class, I learned that patterning normally creates some kind of, emotional response or effect. How you use the patterning, where you stage the character. So patterning and staging is very well used in the film. The cinematography is very effective. There are a few problems with the script, and the pacing of the film felt a little off in different chunks. Normally, you have a part in the film where your hero is at the darkest moment, and for this film, that part went on a little long, but it wasn't effective length. Whereas the beginning of the film felt very rushed and didn't really establish the relationships as solid as it needed to be. So anyway, now I'm going to get into the plot. So the plot is Chloe Grace Moretz, I think her name is Frances in the film. We'll refer to her as Frances from now on. Frances finds a purse on the New York subway, and she brings it to her apartment with her friend, and her friend is a very spoiled girl. Her dad bought the apartment that both of them live in, so they basically get to party and do whatever they want. Frances's best friend, the Macon Monroe character, I don't actually remember her name. She pretty much spends all of her time partying and being a vacuous whore, unfortunately. She at no point tries to really do the right thing, and she's just pretty much an awful character, but she looks pretty hot in this film, so she is doing a good job. Anyway, Frances, compelled by her good Boston nature, brings the purse back to Isabelle Huppert's character, her name was Greta, yeah. Brings it back to Greta. And they form a bond pretty fast. This part of the film was very awkward. It's pretty much scene, cut, scene, cut, scene. Nothing connecting the scenes other than a vague idea, and then the meat of each scene is basically a bonding moment between the characters. And then at one point, we have a scene between Frances and her roommate, the girl from It Follows, and she's, becoming jealous of Frances, and then it has one of the most... There's a lot of awkwardness in the beginning of the film. The script is really bad at the beginning. It gets much better later on, but it's real bad at the beginning. So there's a conversation between Frances and her roommate, and she's like, "Oh, she's not going to replace your dead mom. Why are you hanging out with her? You're just looking for a surrogate mom. You got to face reality. Your mom's dead." I don't know. Maybe I'm the autist. Maybe I don't understand social relationships, but I don't think people talk like that, especially that bluntly. I mean, Macon Monroe's character is shown to be rather blunt and stupid and a dumb whore, but with that level of tact, considering what we see later on in the film, kind of is in contrast, It's a little strange, but we'll get into that. So, I would, in a lot of senses, say that this film is shot in the French New Wave style, and what I mean by that is, for those of you who don't know French New Wave is a cinema that was in response to Hollywood. Basically, France didn't have a lot of money for movies, and they're like, well, if we can't make good Hollywood movies, Well, let's intentionally make bad movies. And that's what they did. They would just shoot, they call it life as lived. So they would basically, like, shoot the scene, and then if there's some people honking outside, or a car goes by and blares a loud horn, or somebody shoots a gun, whatever, you're going to record it, you're going to keep it, you don't give a shit. Frankly, I think that's pretty cool, but you can't really get around the fact that it's pretty lazy. Another big aspect of French New Wave, seen in the film Breathless by Jean-Luc Godard, whatever, is there's nothing really connecting the different scenes other than a character says, "Oh, I have to go do an interview later on," and that's all you know. And then the next scene is that character doing the interview, and there's no connectivity between the two scenes. You don't see a lot of movement. In this scene, you see like the movement right up to the character getting to the place. But sometimes it does happen to cut when the character's already in the location. So it is kind of similar to the French New Wave, a little bit. And I thought that was pretty refreshing, actually. The film didn't waste a lot of time. It was kind of like Alita, but this one did a little better job in terms of the pacing of the cutting and then what they showed. The script was actually worse, though, in a lot of ways. It was very forced. It feels like the characters are, at times, I feel like a lot of unintentional interpretations arise between Francis and Greta. Namely, when they're cooking some dinner together, and Greta and Francis are both in a nice dress that if you were taking a girl out to an Italian restaurant, you'd probably want her to wear that. And they both look pretty attractive. In this scene, though, we notice something very jarring, is that Greta is a frail, small old lady. And Francis is, Chloe Grace Moretz's character is easily twice her size. I mean, this will become important later. Anyway, they have a dinner, or they're about to, when Francis can't find the candles, and earlier on, there was this establishment that Greta likes lighting candles, even if she doesn't believe, and she goes to the church every Friday because her husband died, or something silly like that. I don't exactly remember the basics, because it's not really important. Greta turns out to be a liar. Francis is instructed to get the candles out of the closet, in which she opens up one of the bottom drawers and finds multiple purse bags, similar to the one that she found on the subway, and they have different people's names behind them. And this is where the plot starts getting interesting, and then the plot gets uninteresting for a long time. So, it turns out Greta is a weirdo and is leaving purses to basically lure people to her house, her apartment or whatever, and then befriend them. I mean, it's kind of innocuous. It's not that bad. Anyway, Greta sees this, and Francis sees this, and then they start eating the dinner a little bit, but Francis gets weirded out and just like leaves, and it's very obvious that she's seen something disturbing. But before that, when they were cooking the food, this is when the movie hits the closest point of implied incestuous lesbianism. So in the film, Francis lost her mother. Greta, we learn later, lost her daughter. So they both are missing something that they can use in each other to complete each other. But they're also not related, and they like getting close and trying the food together, and they seemingly just like start doing a lot of dating-esque things in very romantic kinds of situations. And honestly, I really would have liked this film to go further with it. I think it would have made the drama more believable. What we get instead is unfortunate. I think there really should have been a scene where Francis and Greta had sex. I think that would have really made it more psychosexually confusing and more fucked up and more jarring later on when we see how that connection damages Greta and then is hard for Francis to get over. But instead, Francis basically like nopes out of the relationship after like 3 dates, and then Greta just can't let go and starts stalking her. That's basically the next plot for about 45 fucking minutes. So what I'm going to describe now is pretty boring. I apologize. Basically, Greta at this point just starts stalking Francis. Like she calls her a bunch, and then this culminates in what's supposed to be a thrilling chase scene where Greta is chasing the girl from It Follows. She's getting followed again this time, but it's by an old lady. And she's following her, and as Greta is following the It Follows girl, Greta is also texting pictures of this to Frances saying, "Oh, your friend's so pretty, do whatever. Oh, I thought you stick around my bubble gum. Why'd you leave me? Blah blah blah." It's very disturbing and very, very cringe, I gotta be honest, because what's she gonna do? Like, I mean, even Maka Monroe, the girl from It Follows, she's like 10 feet tall. Greta is like 5'3". I mean, she's looking pretty cute for an old lady, you know? I mean, I don't know. But, yeah, It Follows girl could totally kick her ass. So, it's hard to tell what the issue is here. Now, another thing I won't really get into too much, but it definitely deserves to be examined. There's a lot of white privilege in this film. First example, the two girls are able to live in an apartment in Manhattan, paid for by her dad after her graduation. Now, that's not necessarily white privilege, but if you're in America and you're doing good, probably white on average, and then to be able to be doing so good that your father is able to buy you a 1,500 and minimum sized apartment that has multiple floors, yeah, your family's doing pretty good. So the reason I bring up the white aspect is there not really a lot of colored characters in the film except for one later on, and she's kind of pointless. But Frances, when first arriving, I believe, to Greta's house, she goes there by bike, and she leaves her bike on the side of a building next to a busy sidewalk, and she doesn't lock it up. Now, I know it's a film and we're not supposed to be like, seeing all these minor details, but the fact is that later on in the film she has the bike. I can guarantee you, I mean, I live in a pretty safe city, and you leave a bike like that unattended for any amount of time, that shit's gonna be gone. So there's a part of the film that is hard to relate to because it doesn't understand the realities of people living in this environment. And I think the director tried to get around not understanding those environments by portraying the characters as wealthy and rich and white, which is something that he's probably more comfortable with or something knows more about. Example, Frances's character works as a waitress at a fancy restaurant. The old lady Greta is in love with French culture. She's actually a Hungarian, though, twist, but she puts on this really bad French accent. Now, it turns out the actress is actually French, but when I first heard her speaking French, or her French accent or whatever, I thought, this is a bad French accent. Turns out it's on purpose. I believe the actress is purposely putting on a bad French accent and not actually using her real French accent. I hope. If she did that, I thought she did a really good job. Anyway, her fake snootiness about aspiring to be French is the real kicker. Yeah, so basically Greta just stalks Frances for a while. It's really fucking boring. There's a subplot about Chloe and her dad having issues because Chloe's mom died, and the dad's like, "Come on, Chloe, I got over it. You should too." And it's just like everybody talks when it comes to real loss and trauma and damage. The characters in this movie have no fucking subtlety whatsoever. It is absolutely pathetic. But let's just skip ahead to the last 45 minutes of the film. So this film's pretty long. Basically, Chloe reconnects with Greta, or Frances, sorry. Frances reconnects with Greta, and they meet up, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go away on a vacation, I'll contact you as soon as I get back." And then Frances, I forget who she thought. I think she was gonna go with her roommate or her dad. Who does she think she was gonna go? She was gonna go with somebody. I don't exactly remember who. This part of the film, there's a plot hole, actually. But basically what happened is Frances comes back to her apartment and drinks some coffee. She then is, like, messed up in the head, and Greta shows up and drags her back to her house. I mean, she doesn't drag her back there. She gets there in a taxi, and she's like, "Oh, I gotta take my daughter, she's sick, whatever, so it's not just completely bullshit." And she gets her back into the house, and you really see Greta struggle carrying Frances around, which makes sense, because Greta, the old actress, is half the size of Frances, Chloe Grace Moretz, because Chloe Grace Moretz is a monster. There's one scene where she's got some thick arms. I gotta be honest, she's definitely been working on her ass a little bit, so she's not as much fridge body in this film, but she's a fucking monster. She could just swing one arm and just take Greta's head off. Like, it's not even funny. But anyway, in this sequence, Greta puts Frances in a little, like, toy chest. And then she's like, "Oh, let's see how you like leaving me," or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And she, like, seemingly locks her in there. And Frances wakes up and starts panicking and starts like hitting the thing, and you think like, oh, this is gonna be the end of the film. Like, Frances lied to Greta. Greta got revenge, and it's gonna be a bad ending film. Nope. It was a dream sequence. Frances was actually in her apartment the whole time. She was having a paranoid delusion. And then, oh, I don't even remember exactly what happens. But basically, I don't remember how this happens. But basically, Greta actually does. Oh no, it's a fake out. Frances goes to the elevator, and then when she's in the elevator, it starts like closing in around her and getting all fucked up, and it's insane. And then she wakes up from that, and then it turns out that she's actually is in Greta's house, and she actually is a slave there. In the room behind the piano. Now, this is pretty interesting because early in the film, Frances, when she was visiting Greta's house, there was some banging, and Greta was like, bang, bang, bang on the wall. She's like, oh, please keep it down. The construction is very loud. I am entertaining ghosts. And now you understand what the noise was. It wasn't construction going on. It wasn't remodelers or anything like that. The noise going on was another person that Greta had trapped in the wall that was trying to alert Frances of her peril. And then Frances becomes that girl trapped in the wall too. Basically now this is a really, really bad cut sequence of not really Stockholm Syndrome. We see basically two instances of conditioning in the film when Frances is slave in Greta's house, basically. At one point, they're playing the piano, and Greta gets her hand slapped by a ruler. Otherwise, most of the scenes are fucking boring. Frances just basically sits in the bed, doesn't really do anything. She wears like a nightgown kind of thing. It's pretty boring. There's nothing weird going on. There's not really a lot of abuse, and you don't really see a lot of Stockholm Syndrome or the kind of more disturbing aspects of, confining a person to a small space or, just taking control of someone's life entirely. You don't really see a lot of you don't see the meat of that. You see the outcome of how it affects Frances, like right at the end, but you don't see it happening really. You just see her in the area and you just fill in the blanks in your mind. It's French New Wave. Who gives a shit? But anyway, the dad and the roommate are both convinced by Greta that Frances is going on a vacation with each other, and then eventually it comes like, oh, I'm gonna come see you. I'm here, Dad. I'm the dad. I'm here to be the dad now. I'm gonna show up, and then the dad shows up and Frances isn't there, and then the dad and the roommate realize, oh shit, she's been fucking taken. Oh my god, we gotta get that guy from the Taken series. So the dad talks to, I think, some French investigator guy, and then they already know about the Greta character, and she worked at a hospital place, I guess, or whatever. Anyway, while this is going on, Frances attempts to make an escape while they are cooking eggs or cookies or something, and Greta gets beamed in the face with a rolling pin, and then also she gets her finger cut off in a really cool way. The lady has her hand down and there's a cookie cutter thing on it, and then Frances like slams the cookie rolling pin down and cuts her finger off. So you think, oh, thank God, like Greta is fucking down for the count. Frances is like boss monster and she can win. And then like Greta recovers and just injects Frances with some fucking green liquid, and then she falls unconscious. And it's like, really? Like, why didn't you just beat her up some more? Like, why did you... Like, she didn't drop the rolling pin. She didn't commit the horror movie trope of dropping your weapon after the bad guy's down. But she might as well have, because she didn't even attempt to protect herself after fucking incapacitating the bad guy. Like, what the fuck? So, the film continues. Unfortunately, at this point, it's getting a little long. It's dragging. It's still shot pretty well. It's just that it hasn't shown us, I think, what we need to show to care about these characters. And it just feels like, on Greta's part, it's such an overreaction at this point. Like, why the fuck do you care so much about this girl? You didn't even bang her, and maybe if they wanted to, but... I'm not even including the part about the fact that Greta's daughter's dead, and that's a twist. Like, that whole part was just stupid as shit. So... the investigator comes around to Greta's place, and you think, oh, thank God. Like, this guy's going to have a gun. This guy's going to handle it. We're going to be okay. Nope. The investigator gets, like, injected in the neck, and then at this point, like, Greta is dancing around the apartment and tiptoeing and, like, ooh, la, and she's, like, doing, like, these, like, real floaty kind of movements, and the investigator is, like, shooting at her, and she's also... Frances' character is in the room behind Greta, and she's also getting shot at, and this creates for a cool scene later on. So the writing is bad, and the plot is bad too, but it sets up for some cool scenes. So, cool scene number one: Greta is patching the holes in the wall where Frances is being held captive from the gunshots, and it creates this kind of like Edgar Allan Poe, building the bricks. I think that's an Edgar Allan Poe story where, you're building the bricks to like wall in some person into the wall and they're just going to be there and die. It creates that kind of scenario, and it also solidifies the kind of hopelessness. Like the light shining through is like, it's a light from the outside. It's a kind of hope for her to get out. But then, Greta seals it back up, and then you feel like she's hopeless at this point. I thought that was pretty well done, and they shot it definitely with that intention. It was really well done. Another great scene is immediately following Greta re-incapacitating Frances, following the finger snapping off and roller pin derby, is that the scene starts on Greta's finger. It's like missing, and she's like bringing in a needle and injecting a lot of blue liquid, and it's like pulling away from this, and it looks like a great shot. It just looks great. Like, I can't really describe it to you. You just have to see it. It's a great shot. If you watch the trailer, all of this is going to get spoiled to you anyway, so I would suggest taking a look if you're mildly interested in the film and you watched all this. I watched the film with no ideas, and I was lukewarm on it. If you know the plot, then the film's like a 3 out of 10. If you don't know the plot, then the film's a 5 out of 10. But, so here's the big ending. We follow a brown-haired girl who picks up one of the purses, and she has this kind of Tennessee accent, and she wants to be a model. But this is the part that doesn't make any sense. That girl with the brown hair, yep. If it wasn't turning over in your brain, I'll spell it out for you. It's the girl from It Follows. It's the roommate. Now, how did Greta not recognize the roommate, even though she was following her at one point? Yeah, that's a fuck up on their part. But this part's pretty good. Greta gets fucked up pretty hard by the roommate, and then she gets Chloe out, and then they like reconnect and they hug pretty passionately, like they were lovers. It was really bizarre. Like, I understand, like, you just freed your friend, but there's a degree of vulnerability in Frances's character that is interesting in the shots in which her and her roommate are embracing post-escape. It's a little weird. There's also like a girl in the basement too. I don't know. But the film ends in a pretty good way in terms of the shot. So the final shot of the film is that they've moved the chest now. In the orientation of the room, the chest was on the left side from entering through the door. The film ends, though, with the chest center from the door so the camera can pull back, and Greta is put into the chest, and then she's locked shut with an Eiffel Tower. Now, this is kind of a symbolic justice, because it's a plastic little Eiffel Tower toy that's locking her in this chest, and Greta, the thing about her was that she was fake, and her accent was fake, and she was actually Hungarian, not French. So, in a way, it's this kind of poetic justice of, like, your fake persona, your fake Frenchness, your fake, I'm an old lady who, needs her purse brought to her, is what ultimately dooms her in the end. So it was a bit of poetic justice. In that regard, the film was pretty good. The film has good cinematography and has some good shots, but unfortunately the plot didn't spread itself out properly. If the film were like a sandwich, it would have been like a tiny thin piece of bread in the bottom, and then like a really like D-grade meat burger in the middle, and then like on the top like a kind of biscuit bun. Like, it's pretty good. It's what you want, but they forgot to butter it, so it just didn't have that like really take it home zing, is the unfortunate aspect. So if you didn't watch this and somehow you're listening to me right now, the film is a 5 out of 10, and it's interesting. if you know the spoilers and the twists and everything, then it's like a 2 to 3 out of 10. Don't fucking watch it unless you really like interesting cinematography that's not complicated. Like if like this film employs patterning and it's very surface level for the most part. But there's stuff to get into, and it's repeated so much that you can easily notice it. So I think for an intro to film kind of person, it's a pretty good film to check out. But yep, that's my review. Thanks.